Welcome to Start Strong, your first piano lesson and the path ahead. I'm Landon Baumgard. We are so thrilled that you're here with us today. Some of you, of course, are preparing for your very first lesson ever. We've got new teachers with us in this group, and we're so excited you're here. We might have some veteran teachers who are simply looking for ways to refine their approach with those first few lessons. No matter where you are in your journey, today is going to give you, hopefully, some really solid tools and ideas that you can apply. Now, let's start with this. That very first lesson, there's a mixture, right, of excitement and maybe some nervousness for both the teacher and the student, especially if you're a less experienced teacher, right? You want to make a good first impression with the student. You want them to leave that first lesson excited. You want their family to love you, right? But sometimes it's difficult to know where to start and what to prioritize. Here's what we've learned through working with thousands of teachers and also our own students. The most successful first lessons aren't necessarily about covering a whole lot of material. They're about creating the right foundation. Of course, part of that is going to be that relationship building that rapport with the student. Anyways, these are exactly some of the ideas we're diving into today. We have two amazing figures in piano pedagogy with us today. Dr. Margarita Denenburg from the University of Texas at Austin will be sharing the essential pedagogical principles that every successful first student needs, or first lesson needs, that is. And then Randy Faber will also be joining us to show you exactly how these principles translate into practical, engaging activities through our method series for the younger beginner called My First Piano Adventure. Now, before we dive into the strategies, Randy, I'd love for you to set the stage. Can you share with our audience why it is that very first lesson or first few lessons is so crucial for long-term student success?
Thank you, Landon. Great question. Well, we have to look at the perspective from the student, right? And what happens so often is that our perspective from our experience as a teacher, we kind of know where the student's going. We know all about piano and lessons. But the student has a very different viewpoint because they have absolutely no experience of what's going on, other than maybe some, hopefully not horror stories of their siblings studying piano. But they're often somewhat apprehensive. They don't know what this is about. So that first lesson is really important of setting the emotional stage for that student's relationship with you as the teacher and the relationship with the piano and what these piano lessons are going to be about. You know, we could move right into, I know there's a lot of teachers here that are new. We've got a lot of piano pedagogy students and you're embarking on your piano career. So as we look at that first lesson and for the students, I also want to look at what can be some overarching viewpoints for the early teacher, because we can parlay these things that'll really play into how we deal with early lessons as well. So I have two words that I want to play around with you here for starters. The first is the word development. Think of this, we are developing the child's skills, right? And so of course we think right away, well, we're developing pianistic skill. But what else might we be developing? So if we can widen the lens, so to speak, and really look at our relationship with the child and their piano lessons, that this process of taking the lessons can develop attitudes, can develop perception, character, as well as specific musical and pianistic skills. So this is, as a word, if we keep that breadth, that we're responsible for this development of the child, that we're doing the student the best justice in those early lessons and ongoing. I'd like to just go right to the root of that word if we just go to the word develop. So from development to develop, this is pointed because develop is a verb and it tells us that we are the responsible party in the lessons to make things happen, to make change progress. But in a way, even though we're responsible, we don't want to get into this idea of that we're going to push and drive and discipline skill in from the beginning. That would be a mistake. The word develop has that awkward prefix to it. It's the DE. And I've often thought about that, like, why is it develop? Shouldn't it be envelop or envelop or, promoting and that blossom? Why is it to develop? What's being taken away? And if we look at the root of the word, what we're doing is taking away the wrapper. In other words, develop means we're unwrapping what's able to blossom. And that is a very nice metaphor, if you think about it, that we provide the nurturing conditions for the student's capabilities, musical perceptual capabilities, rhythmic capabilities, pianistic skill, and so on, that unfolds, that unwraps. So we do this alongside the student instead of pushing it onto the student. And when we're talking about first lessons, that student's going to be so relieved when we're walking alongside them in this adventure of piano, so to speak, as opposed to we're standing there pushing them into something. It makes a world of difference that they see that you are on their side, we're in this adventure together, and that's the environment that lets those skills and attitudes, character, emotions, and all unfold. It allows them to develop. Let's look at a second concept here that we can apply across our teaching, and that is age appropriateness. Our lessons have to be age appropriate. And of course, if we're looking at the young beginner, we're looking at a different sort of interaction than we would with the college students. And if you're a new teacher, again, your history and experiences are going to keep that performance mode in such highlighted focus. And what you need to do is relieve that a little bit. Take some air out of that, take attention off self and put it fully on the student. And when we do that, then we find it's not just all about piano repertoire, it's about the student's development. So looking at the student and teaching them from their age, where they are in terms of their motivation and all, is so much different than looking at that teaching from our own perspective. So we have to change our lens, and we have to adapt to the different ages of students. I just was thinking a little bit on this too. We have age appropriate. What did we change that a little bit and said stage appropriate? That's kind of interesting because this would be what stage of motivation is the student in. Obviously, if they're grad school, they've got intense motivation and they'll take a lot of discipline. They'll take a lot of deep learning and deep focus, and that's even what the student wants. But when the student is less committed and they're exploring, then if we push too hard, often we get out of sync. I'm reminded just this weekend, I had some relatives visiting, and my brother, he's a trumpet player. He was always a great trumpet player as a young high school student and all, and he's come back to it in adulthood. And he was taking lessons from a very experienced, proficient teacher online. And so I was asking him how his lessons going, and he said, well, I quit. And we think of this as something, the students quit when they're young, but why would an adult quit so quickly after only a few months of lessons? And I said, well, tell me about that. And he said, well, the teacher was having me just play long-held notes. He called them pedal tones, On the trumpet, it's just a long-held note to get your clarity of tone and consistency of tone. And his wife kept saying, well, when are you going to play some songs? And he says, I don't know. I'd like to also. And so he queried that with the teacher, and the teacher says, don't worry about it. Just play these long tones, and you'll develop this great embouchure, and soon you'll play everything with ease. Well, he got awfully tired of playing those long notes. Plus, he was blowing out his lip, so he couldn't even practice much. So it was a classic case of a very proficient teacher not teaching stage appropriately, because the level of commitment and professional aspirations aren't the same. He's not needing to revamp his technique for some lofty professional purpose. He wants to get back to the trumpet playing. And we find this consistently at the piano also, that we get out of sync between teacher and student. A prime example that I reflect on, where I had an adult student, and he came to me and he wanted to learn what to do with his left hand. In other words, he wanted to be able to play some lead sheets and pop songs and so on. What do I do with the left hand? Well, I said, well, play for me a little bit. And he started playing the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata, which is quite big and difficult. And I was thrilled with the technique potential that he had. And I thought, well, we should revamp his technique. I can rebuild him into a really fine pianist. And so I start working on his Beethoven, But about a month later, he just had lost his zest. And I realized what I should have done is showed him some root third fifths and show him a stride bass or a boogie bass or Alberti bass patterns. I should have answered his question, what to do with your left hand. So as a teacher, then make sure you're teaching the student in front of you, not some hybrid student where you play through a certain process. You teach through a certain process. Teach the student in front of you. And key to that then is the age appropriateness or the stage appropriateness. Well, we can go into details in another webinar sometime about the motivations at different ages. But for now, because we're talking about the very first lesson, let's just highlight a few elements of that early lesson. I'm going to throw out 3 words because we're dealing with the youngster now, right? And that youngster, we have to think of play, fun, and joy. Those are pretty powerful words, play, fun, and joy. And if we put them in a meaning, how do they differentiate amongst those? Well, play is the verb, right? So the activity of learning with that student is to be involved with a student. You're exploring music together. And play is how a child learns. And then how about fun and joy? Well, fun can be the output. That's an experience of that play. It is fun. So in other words, it validates the activity as fun so the student comes back. And joy is the real powerful one, because if we consistently have fun at the piano, we start bringing joy into the student's life. It's the joy of music making, that love of music, love of the lesson. And that joy is actually part of that developmental process, isn't it? Because we've inculcated or groomed or let blossom that attitude of joy. So those are some few key words to keep in mind for your early lessons. Now let's dig into some more theory of teaching that first lesson. I'm delighted to have with us today Dr. Margarita Denenburg, and I'll turn it over to you, Margarita.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Randy, for such a warm welcome and for your statements and summarizing so perfectly that young age, that joy, that playfulness that children have. At UT Austin, I have the privilege of working with extraordinary pianists. However, they often have very limited experience teaching younger children. Every year, I witness the incredible creativity and pedagogical instinct in novice teachers. There is a genuine desire to make those lessons memorable, to create a nurturing environment where students experience the joy of making music. No doubt that the first lesson can be quite stressful for an inexperienced teacher. But that being said, what I want every new teacher to understand today is this. And now let me see my slides here. Thank you. Perfect. So what I want every new teacher to think about and to understand is this. You already have many of the traits needed to be an effective teacher. You love music and piano, because why else would you dedicate your life to it? You're extremely patient because you practice hours and handle extremely repetitive tasks with perseverance. You consistently follow through by having a solid practice routine. You know how to break down difficult tasks when practicing. And most importantly, you have been your own teacher for a very long time. So yes, you already have experience teaching. All these traits are directly transferable to teaching others. Thus, you might be surprised to know that you have many of the teaching instincts comfortably living within you and waiting to be engaged and discovered. The musical experiences that you had so far are valuable for you as a teacher. For example, you definitely know and experienced nerves. You know how to be nervous and what it feels like in a new situation, and what helps you feel comfortable. You can draw on that empathy to create an optimal learning environment for your student. I will walk you through 3 essential foundations that make the first lesson successful. When these 3 pillars are in place, you will be amazed at how much your students can achieve and how confident you will feel as their teacher. The 3 pillars are emotional foundation, musical foundation, and physical foundation. And all of that could be initiated in that first lesson. A nurturing environment lays the groundwork for a student's emotional connection to music and to you as their teacher. During the first lesson, you have the unique opportunity to build a bond between yourself, the student, the piano, and the music. Your ultimate goal is to establish a nurturing, positive environment, as well as what I call a mistake-friendly zone. First lesson is all about exploration and experimentation. It is a time where student gets to meet that new friend, the piano. Learning through discovery is a key here. I like to introduce the grand piano as a living friend. It has legs, it has a big smile, it does have a heart and even a soul. I open the lid and invite students to peek inside. A step stool can help them to see better the keyboard, the hammers and all of the inside of the piano. I guide them with questions. What do you see inside? Look inside. When I play a note, what happens? What happens when I press the pedal? Please say your name as loudly as you can while I press the damper pedal. And what we usually hear, of course, is the echo. Now, every new student will be a little bit shy at first, but what a fun and joyful experience it is to actually say your name as loud as possible into the piano. Next, I let the child play the keys themselves, exploring low versus high sounds, big versus small strings, loud versus soft tones. This exploration shifts the child's mindset from fearing the unknown to embracing curiosity. There is no place for fear here. Equally important is setting clear, achievable expectations. There is no rush. Our adult lives move at a pace young child cannot possibly keep up with. Don't overwhelm them. There is time. There's so much to learn, and they will eventually learn. So instead, I would like to mention today we are going to become friends with the piano. Learn what the piano likes and how it plays, and discover the beautiful sounds it can make. Notice what I don't say. Today we are going to learn all the notes on the keyboard, we're going to learn how to read, and we are going to learn a lot of different songs. I mean, that might happen, but the goal is exploration, not performance. Children learn best through play, and the first lesson is a perfect opportunity to initiate that process. Build confidence through micro successes. Every child should leave the lesson thinking, I can do this. That was fun. I can't wait to go back. Celebrate every success, no matter how small. Whoa, you found the high sounds. How exciting. Listen to that beautiful tone you created. Your piano is smiling. You discovered something new. Your hands look so beautiful and comfortable on the keyboard. Your genuine excitement and tone helps children see themselves as capable and creative. Finally, address perfectionism early. Some children freeze at the first wrong note or at the first unsuccessful attempt. I tell them, mistakes are how we learn. In fact, let's make some interesting mistakes on purpose and see what we discover. Remember, you are not just teaching piano. You are teaching a child to love music. You're fostering that relationship, to believe in their musical abilities and to feel connected. That belief system begins on day one and cannot wait. Now I would like to move to the second pillar, and it is the musical foundation. So before we teach notation and reading, we must connect students to sound and music itself. Always play beautiful music for your students with beautiful, colorful sounds, as if you're performing in Carnegie Hall for a very well-educated audience. And that has to start at the very first lesson. Let them hear what's possible, what they're working toward. Play two contrasting pieces, one lively and energetic, and the other perhaps slow or lyrical. Then ask, what did you hear? How did it make you feel? What do you think the music is about? Sometimes I ask students to draw a picture of what the music inspired and bring it to the next lesson. This sparks creativity and helps them listen more deeply and make the experience more memorable. Choose short, imaginative pieces written specifically for children. Do not play Beethoven sonatas for your children. Perhaps you can save it for later. Some examples might include pieces from Schumann's album for the young or Tchaikovsky. A piece with a title naturally invites storytelling and emotional connection. I would like to briefly share with you two wonderful examples. The first one is the well-known The Wild Horseman by Robert Schumann. Now, Schumann was one of the very first composers that recognized that children are not simply little adults, but that they have their own developmental needs. He wrote 43 short pieces for his 3 daughters. While the first part of the album is specifically for children, the second half is marked for adults or for the more grown-up ones. As we listen to The Wild Horseman, let's consider a few questions. Who is the wild horseman? Where is he riding to? What does his horse look like? Let's take a listen to just the A section as I play it for you. So, of course, there is no single correct answer here, right? One child might imagine a toy soldier galloping off to rescue his friends, while another might hear a child riding quickly across a field on a little horse. Since this piece was written quite a long time ago, I sometimes suggest that it could represent an old-fashioned toy, which is a horse on a stick, with a child riding around their little house. And because the house is so little, they are bumping into the furniture in that small space. Can you hear those moments in the music? Those sforzandos? Yes, exactly. That's what it is. All right. Let's go now to the second example. Thank you. And the second example is a completely different piece. and it is from Tchaikovsky's album For the Young. That album was published about 30 years after Schumann's work. And this collection also contains music that was written specifically for children, though it includes only 24 pieces and does not have a selection of pieces specifically for adults. The piece I have chosen is The Sick Doll, which is, of course, the complete opposite of The Wild Horseman. Now, as you listen to just a few lines, ask yourself, what is the sick doll doing? Does she have a name? What might be wrong with her? What is she sick with? So let me play for you just the A section again. So on and so forth. It's hard to stop because the music is just so special and so beautiful. But so here's an example. Sorry about that. Here's an example of exploring completely different set of emotions. It explored tender, meaningful emotion, perhaps sadness or hurt or loneliness. Discussing such feelings with children fosters an immediate bond. The response are often imaginative and deeply insightful. For example, one of my students once said the doll was crying or sighing, while another explained that the doll was weeping because her owner had forgotten her, and that is why she had become sick. Let's have the slides back, please. So the first lesson can also include sound explorations and the creation of vivid imagery and associations. Invite the student to discover the piano's possibilities in imaginative ways. High sounds like tiny bells, low sounds like gentle thunder, the singing quality of connected tones, and the percussive excitement of detached tones. This is not chaotic noise, but purposeful musical exploration. I often tell students, the piano wants to tell us all about the sounds it can make. Let's listen carefully to its stories. Together, we compare sounds to animals or human voices, exploring all of its different varieties. That togetherness makes the experience of the first lesson even more powerful. Connecting music to movement is another powerful tool. Rhythm is already in child's body. Their heartbeat, their walking pace, their breath. Have them clap, march, sway, or use conducting gestures. Later, these movements naturally transfer to playing the piano. The final pillar that I would like to share with you today is the physical or technical foundation. Start with the bench height and posture. Imagine trying to focus while standing on an unstable surface. Yes, as an adult. That's how it feels for a child whose feet are dangling or who sits at the wrong height. A balanced sitting position has 4 parts: how high the bench is, how far from the piano, how deep the student sits, front third of the bench is the correct position, how or where the feet rest, or more specifically, their heels have to be solid, either on the floor or, because we're talking about young children, usually using a footstool to help their feet to stay stable. Each child's physique is, of course, different, so adjust accordingly. A bench that is too high causes slouching, too low, and you will see the shoulders will rise up. Similarly with the step stool, it has to be at an appropriate height, so students' body balances forward on their heels. Posture is connected to sitting position. I try not to say, sit up straight, which creates tension. Instead, I say, let's sit tall, like you're about to hear wonderful news. And I try to sit tall with the student. And finally, just tiny bit about the hand shape. So I ask the students to imagine holding a small bird, firm enough so it doesn't escape, but gentle enough so it isn't harmed. But of course, the goal is to have a very natural hand shape without tension. If you were to ask your student to stand up, their hand will just kind of dangle on the side. And then if you just put it on your palm, that's the hand shape that would be perfect and perfectly shaped. And finally, most importantly, find the right balance. And I would say that's one of the most difficult things. Finding that right balance between talking and doing. With young children, less talking is almost always better. Briefly explain the reason behind an activity when needed. Often it is done for the sake of child's parent, but keep instructions short and simple. Watch your language. You don't want to use too many of difficult words. A few well-chosen words can leave a lasting impression. Move between activities quickly and avoid spending too much time on one task. Watch your students' body language. It will tell you so much. It will tell you when they're engaged, when they're ready for something new, and when they need a moment to process. Young children learn best in short bursts of activity with plenty of variety. So keep things lively, positive, and interactive to hold their attentive and maintain their enthusiasm. And now I will pass it back to Randy.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Wonderful. I love hearing about your three foundations, the emotional foundation, musical foundation, and physical foundation. And if we relate those back to my opening remarks, we have a nice paradigm there, because we could say that we're developing the emotional connection, we're developing the musical perception, and we're developing the physical foundations, the physicality. And we can explore each of those. And I'd like to now just take us through those very early pages of my first Piano Adventures, Book A. So the very first lesson, what might we be looking at? And let's just look at those activities in terms of these three foundations that Margarita so well elucidated. Our opening song, and note here too, it's not the opening statement, it's not our talking, but it's the emotion first song. We're going to move, in other words, right into activity with the student, because that idea of playing, exploring with the student means doing. So we're going to be actively doing, exploring together. So our first song here is The Friends at the Piano, and it's not just teacher and student right now. We've got Katie and Carlos, Marty and Mila, all these characters, our friends at the piano, who are joining us in this lesson, Fun. And what this does is it takes the student's attention off himself or herself, because they're sharing the stage with these students. So that uneasiness that a young student might have of just being there with a teacher goes away when we extrovert them towards the friends at the piano. So this is kind of an emotional experience, you might say. And emotion, what does emotion mean? It's the chemicals of emotion are activating motion, right? So emotion and activity go right together. So if they get excited about these friends, and we're talking about friends, well, let's get into this activity of motions with the friends. And this will be wonderful for bringing in some perceptual ability. So the roll call, On the opposite page there, its intent, as you see in the subtitle, is to keep a steady beat. So we're going to bring in some music, and we want to have the student move to the music. And so the movement is getting that beat into the body. Margarita brought that up so well too. It's not talking about a quarter note, no, it's getting the perception of that beat and of that meter into the body. So I won't be tapping with you because we might be out of sync here. We're playing the audio from another city. So, but imagine if you'll do it along with this audio, as you hear it, tap on your lap. Just tap on your lap like this. And when we get to the chorus, you can even go tap, 2, 3, 4, tap, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's hear the audio.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, ready, sing.
Friends at the piano, we're a band of friends. Me, Millie, me, Martha, they're the twins. Hey, Carlos, hey, Dallas, Katie, too. Mrs. Razzle Dazzle is tapping with you.
Tap the beat. Roll call, please.
Millie, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And so forth. So right there's a good spot to go into the tap on the lap, 2, 3, 4, down, 2, 3, 4, and do variations on this. So when you're coming back in subsequent weeks, you could maybe do tap, clap, or you take instruments, you're playing it on a rhythmic instrument instead. So these variations help the student engage. So when you have a good activity that the student emotionally connects with, come back to it week after week and derive more value from that. I'm going to jump ahead to sounds at the piano. I'm on page 8 of the book here. And here what we're doing is exploring the keyboard. We're going to find white keys, find black keys, and so on, and then exploring sounds. So exploring soft sounds, loud sounds, short sounds, and long sounds. So we're now into that musical foundation, right? We're developing the perception. Let's hear what is the difference between that loud and soft. Can we bring that out? Short and long sounds. Let's see that Nancy just dive into one of her lessons and see how she takes so much time just to bring out each of these little modules on this page to explore those sounds with the students while she's building the relationship in that first lesson.
Tell me, is this gold star on the white keys or the black keys?
White.
Yes, let's play some white keys. That's pretty easy, isn't it? Can you play some too, Katerina? Very good. How about that gold star? Is it on the white keys or the black keys? Black keys. Let's do some black keys. Very nice. Mrs. Razzle Dazzle is here with her little friend. Do you remember his name?
No.
His name is Tap because he loves to tap the rhythm. And she would like us to knock the fall board, which is right here. Very good, girls. I'm going to tap my name, Nancy. Can you tap Katerina?
Katerina. Alexandra.
Very good. Look at the little tiny chicks. Do you think their peeps would be loud or soft? Let's just make some little tiny peeps. Good, Katerina. Can you make a few little peeps up there? And how about the big tiger? Do you think he'd be loud? Let's make some loud sounds. The mouse. He's bouncing around. Very, very short because he just pops up and down. Very good. And lastly, we have the long, long snake. When I say the word snake, I want all of us to play a key and hold it down till we cannot hear the sound anymore. And I'm going to time us. Choose your key. 1, 2, 3, snake. Still keep holding it. Can you still hear it? I can't do. How about now? Can you still hear it? I can't do. Can you still hear it? I hear a little bit. Do you hear it now? I think it's gone. Girls, that was about 30 seconds. Isn't that interesting how long a sound can be?
Okay, now if we go to the very next page, we're going to find those same 7 activities, but we're going to put them in song. So now we have the rhythm and we have a teacher accompaniment and so forth. Will you play some white keys softly, please? Will you play some white keys loudly, please? Will you tap the piano bench now with me? Will you tap the fallboard now with me? Will you play some black keys now with me? And so forth. So we're taking through the same explorations, but now in rhythm and song. So notice the emotional connection while we're developing that perception of louds and softs and so forth. Going to our next page, we get Stone on the Mountain, and here we're going to explore the physicality of playing the piano. This whole little verse here is a great activity. We're going to do motions with it while we're talking about the heaviness of that stone on the mountain. It goes like this. Stone on the mountain falls to the ground. Hold it, mold it, roll it around. Lift your thumb, tap 1, 2, 3. Whoosh goes the wind and lands on the keys. I'll do it right up here. You can watch a little bit more. Stone on the mountain, of course, that's bringing in our arm weight, isn't it? So we have that drop of the heavy arm. So stone on the mountain falls to the ground. Then hold it, mold it. So we have that arch support, but relaxed and roll it around. So here we're even leaning towards the wrist circles, which will be much more advanced, but we get that flexibility of wrist. Then lift your thumb. We get that hinging of the thumb here, very light thumb. We'll talk about it later levels. Lift your thumb, tap 1, 2, 3, and then whoosh goes the wind. So we have that wrist float off here, have that whoosh goes the wind, and it lands on the keys. And then check yourself. It says, are you still holding your hand in that nice light rounded position? Are you holding your stone, picking up on the stone on the mountain? So this is our exploring the physical foundation. And I've heard many people, especially in early days, talk about, well, aren't kids too young at these young ages of 4 and 5 because their finger coordination isn't developed yet? But remember, it's up to us to develop. Remember our word develop. We're developing those foundations of the hand. We're developing the arch. We're developing the coordination. That doesn't develop on its own. It develops through our guidance. So even if the student has poor coordination at these early levels, that's fine. We kind of expect that, right? We're developing the foundations to build the coordination. We're developing coordination. We're developing the physical foundation. And then we take some of these elements, and of course we're going to go back to more explorations and songs, but something like, say our rainbows, left-hand rainbows, right-hand rainbows. We're going to go, the hands play together. We go rainbow, up and down and up and down and up and down. So notice that our wrist here is making arches. So we're playing our wrist float off, which is a secret at level 1, picked up later, in order to make the graceful arches across the keys. So again, physical foundation. And what I love about this is that it's tying the pride of the dance choreography, you could say, of the wrist, but also tying it into sounds while we're going up, we're going high, or we're going low and down. We work out those directions and that perception, and we integrate it in with direction. So that's just some examples out of the My First. There's a lot of exciting songs in there, a lot of imagery, and that imagery brings in story, it brings in the emotional connection, and of course exploring the perceptual musicality, each one soft sounds, slow sounds, and then lively ones. And always here inviting the student to move from chanting lyrics and then into singing the lyrics. And we find that most every student is engaged, boy or girl, with being able to sing while they play as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a little overview of My First Piano Adventures as a curriculum and how it provides these foundations that we're discussing today. Well, we have a little more activity yet going on, and we definitely want to bring in time today to hear from your questions. So Margarita and Landon and I can address your questions. So at this point, I'd like to turn the stage back over to Landon.
Hi, Randy. Thank you for that wonderful content, as well as you, Margarita. It's a pleasure. I didn't know you before this presentation, and I just think this is such a valuable thing that you guys are offering. We've got quite a few pretty big questions, and I want to honor the first one that we have here in our lineup, and it is a big one, but it comes up repeatedly, so I want to give the opportunity. This one's from Hannah. How do I relate to an autistic student? My student is so musical, but there are just some barriers in learning. I want to encourage them, but also stick to the foundations of music. They can be easily frustrated when corrected because they can hear the music, but they do not want to deal with the technique or the theory. What should I do? Any ideas?
Well, I could give a stab at it. I'll give a start, and then I'll let Margarita chime in, okay? One of the therapies for autistic students, what the therapists do with is they call it ABA, which is a applied behavioral therapy, and it's where you break things down into very small micro parts. And so often, because the child is not tracking your attention the same way, because their attention is off to wherever it wants to be. So if you can make it a little more minuscule, you can do a very small next step task. So you're making it more incremental. Sometimes that relieves the frustration. And I've taught a few autistic students and delved into the subject to some degree. The other thing is to take away your expectations of affinity. You know, we expect, when we have our students and we show this love to our student, we kind of expect the reciprocity. And it usually happens. If you care for somebody, you're nurturing them, they really like you back. But sometimes with the autism, there's that disconnect between the people. So the affect is different. And we have to just simply respect that and not feel personally offended. Because the worst thing that can happen is you start to be offended that the student is not responding to you. You just have to leave that out and let it be. And once you find that and you let that student be the individual that they are and do the best to coach them and just change your expectations to accommodate, then usually it's not so frustrating for the teacher. Margarita, if you had any experiences and insights?
Yes, I actually don't have any experience in that field, but just kind of putting my pedagogical hat on, right? And thinking that if I was in that situation, I would probably do several things. The first one would be I would have a very short lesson with them several times a week instead of a very long lesson. And second one is, for me, every child is its own world. They're their own world, right? If it's autistic child or musical child, or maybe a child that is international and doesn't really quite understand what I'm talking about, right? Because the language becomes a barrier. So you have to really watch what the child is like, yes, and tap into that and try to figure out what are some of the ways that are best suited for that specific little human being, right? Like, how is he learning best? Is it by tactile? Is it by rote pieces? Is it by having print that is larger? Because sometimes the distraction may be too much, right? Or so, I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but that's kind of what I would do. I would just really be very sort of critical of myself. And then finally, I would actually record my lesson and watch it back. I would watch it and I would watch what the student, like the body language of that student, like when does he tense up? What is happening when I teach certain things? And I would learn from that experience and kind of create a plan based on that.
I'd like this. A little bit we talked about at the beginning of our session today about age and stage appropriate and really teaching that student in front of you, because I know we all want to have a prescription. Oh, this is how you teach an autistic child. But just as in the normal child, there's huge variations in personality, in the autism spectrum, we find there's even more variations of those individuals. So the deficiencies or the characteristics that cause us problems can vary so much from student to student. So having the varied activities that you can jump to, like you go to the writing book at the table, that gives you an exit stage too, because occasionally something's not going well. You want to be able to exit to something else, and then that gives that trial and error for your reflection when you look back on the lesson and say, what's working for this child and what doesn't work?
I have one more little bit of insight to add there. I think we all know this intuitively, but don't take for granted that that child's expert in kind of bridge for you as a teacher is of course going to be their parent, right? They are such a powerful partner in that journey of educating that child in piano. That parent, they've had that child for years and years, right? They've kind of grown accustomed to what works better, what doesn't work, what's working in school, what kind of things do they need. And if you have the opportunity and a willing parent, having them actually in the lesson can be a really powerful thing, because it kind of takes some of the pressure off you as the teacher to navigate that, right? Because it's pretty rare that we get extensive training in dealing with people with special needs or autism spectrum. So having that parent there to kind of interject as needed can be really powerful. Okay, here's another question. Actually, it's come up a couple times, so I'm just going to kind of generalize it. How do you go about teaching firm fingertips? Because there are some teachers here who say that even with the donuts that we have in our books, they have mixed success getting that last digit here to stay supported. So any additional tips or tricks there?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a good question. So I'm going to actually, it kind of leads nicely from the previous discussion. So first thing that you have to consider that every hand you teach is a different hand, right? Like we have double jointed students. We have all kind of students. So big hands, small hands, little chubby hands, big palm, small palm, narrow fingers. So the way I do it, I do have them, kind of tap their fingers together. Yes, that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do sometimes is actually just the scratch of their nose, just like that, so they can activate that last joint. It's a trick, really. It's not like, yeah. So another powerful thing is actually if they put a flat hand on the lid of the piano and then pretend they're a caterpillar and just slowly raise it up. Yes, because what happens is with some students, when this joint is very weak, they want to curl it up, but they can't. Okay, so it's not like they're not trying. And I had a lot of students like that. They're really frustrated. And they're like, we just can't. So in those cases, if they have played a note, yes, and it's like that, I'm telling them it's okay, but let's try to fix it. And as they're trying to fix it, then they will have a firmer fingertip.
There's a few, thank you for that. There's a number of causes on that. Sometimes it's not purely the strength, but you have to first eliminate what some of the problems are. So if a student's sitting, we talk often if they're sitting too close to the piano, right? Then that brings the wrist low. If the wrist is low, then the fingertip will flop. So if you could get that proper wrist height with a thumb perch at the primer level secret, because in a way, if you have the right wrist height and you're balanced with just a modicum of arm weight on that, that tends to hold the finger in place. The fingertip will be in place. So be sure to check those prerequisites, because you can just work on fingertip alone and the student's sitting too close, which lowers their wrist, and then it'll always collapse. So you have to get to the foundation. If you want a little more demonstrations on that, we've got some sequences on that in the technique videos on the Technique and Artistry online on the Teacher Atlas. But I'm going to share one other little trick that I've used for some success. We never published anything, but I call it monkey tails. Can you come down in this part here? There we go. What I do is have a student, it's a severe case on that. I have them hang with their arm weight. And there's no, see how I slid off? There's no way you can slide off if you get a little muscle on that. So you let them twitch and hold. And then I swing the monkey tail. Then you switch to the next one and you swing. It's an amazing way of having them be aware of that fingertip and build a little more firmness in it in case it's double jointed.
This one is a wonderful one from Polly Wolf. I have several students who just want to play by ear or by learning through YouTube tutorials. Any tips on getting them to focus on the process of learning to use the music, the notated music?
I'll take a stab at just an observation. I've heard probably 100 teachers complain about their student has a really good ear and they're always playing by ear. And I think, don't complain about it, celebrate it. I wish I had that really good ear. I didn't have a very good ear when I was a youngster, and I had to really work on development, right? Developing the ear. So if you have somebody that does have the good ear, don't be critical of it. Be happy and try to utilize it. Maybe you have them do a lot of things by ear and reharmonize and so on. But we do hear the concern. Well, how do you get them into reading? And it's a new experience, of course, and most of my years of teaching was pre-YouTube. So when people are copying YouTube, it's another new element to deal with. So I'll turn it over to Margarita. You might have some insights on that.
Yeah, it's so hard because everything is available everywhere, right? And not everything is always good, right, on YouTube. So you have absolutely no control over what children are exposed to. The only way is to motivate the child to read. They have to want to read, right? So if you create in like some sort of game or a piece of music that they really want to play, right? Or something that is not known to them, right? Not like something like Jingle Bells. Of course, they can figure this out. Yes, but something that is maybe a Christmas song that they don't know. And then assign small bits. I think one of the biggest problems there is that we get really ambitious as teachers. I'm at fault. Sometimes I do that also, right? And instead we kind of go a little bit too fast, like faster than the child can follow us. So we have to make sure with reading that we have little small successes and we build on that. And we don't skip any of the incremental points, because part of the reading, it's just like when they read language, right? It's hard to start, but once you understand how the reading works, it becomes easier and easier. So I guess to answer that question, I would have perhaps almost like 2 parts to a lesson. I would still encourage and do the playing by ear, harmonizing melodies, maybe even doing improvisation with the child. And then the second half, I would say like, okay, great. Now let's look at some fun little pieces that we can read. And those pieces should be very short. They should be very easy for them to read so they feel motivated, right? That's the danger when we put in front of them something that is so hard that they're like, oh my gosh, forget it, just play it for me. So that's what I would do.
I was thinking, today's day and age, the students may think of themselves as imitators because there's so much media around. So they think being a musician means to imitate. And maybe we need to inspire them that instead of being an imitator, they need to be an interpreter, right? They need to be the artist. And what does an artist do? You take the code of that score and you take it out, you pull it apart, you break it down, and then you build it into your own interpretation. And you don't do that through imitation. You're actually doing that by finding what you can do with the music. And maybe that's the challenge, that the students have any concept of what that's like. And so maybe that could be just a little trick. I remember during my studies, in conservatory, university studies, we were not allowed to listen to recordings. First, you had to learn the piece, do your own interpretation, and if you're ever going to listen to a recording, it had to be after you've already memorized it, which probably is extreme. But that idea of interpreting instead of imitating, I think, might be something novel and inspiring for the students, because we're developing them as an artist. And an artist, you're going to put your own self into it. You're not just going to be an imitator.
Wish we could stay the rest of the day and answer all your questions. Maybe we get to do that kind of session again soon. We thank you all for joining us. Any last words of wisdom from our presenters today?
Well, I want to give a big thank you to Margarita Denenburg. Thanks for joining us today and all your preparation time and expertise. We appreciate your being part of the webinar, and I know our audience does as well. And always a big thank you to Landon for your exquisite hosting. You make our job easy. And a shout out to all of you in the audience too. Thanks for joining today. If you liked what's here, we do not only a reposting of our webinars, but we've got many video clips in the Teacher Atlas along the Creative Improv area and Teacher Atlas, or excuse me, the Technique and Artistry online. So there's so much material in there for your edification and professional development. Take a look at it, especially during your pre-offered time, and utilize it.
And by the way, this is really relevant to teachers on this call. In the Teacher Atlas, you have access also to the primer level teacher guide. It's a piece by piece breakdown with lesson tips and videos, wonderful videos with Nancy Faber, such an excellent teacher, and just really creative ideas. That's a really great foundation for you if you're looking for inspiration in those early students.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for having me. Thank you, Randy. Thank you. I think the final thought is always ask. Ask as many questions as you can possibly. There is never a stupid question. Always read as much as possible, learn, watch lessons online, right? You want to be as exposed as possible. I know I'm still learning, right? And every now and then when I record my lesson and I watch it back, I cringe. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Why is it not working? So don't be afraid to experiment and really have fun teaching. It is so much fun.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks
and
so
we
much.
wish you a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Happy teaching.
I know.